All right, Hellblade II, Senua. I mean, oh no, wait. They changed it. It's reversed now. It's Senua Saga Hellblade 2. I don't know why they did that, but I want to talk about the game. So if you're new here, what I do is I put out the before you buy video on Game Ranks, the big review. And then over here, I kind of talk a little bit more off the cuff, some additional feelings, get a little more personal. And this is one I just have had a lot to say about because I really like the original game. It's actually the last video I made on this channel was I replayed that last week in anticipation for this one. I was really excited for this one. I kind of knew what to expect to a point, but ultimately I came away with this new game liking it, not loving it. And I said it in that video, and I need to say it here too. Like, it can be unproductive sometimes. I think if you don't like this type of game, if you think the lack of gameplay or you just don't like story focused things, that's fine. This game is not for everybody, just like the last game was. Like, my ultimate recommendation for people is, like, if you like the last one, play this one. I don't think it's as good as the original, but it's still an adventure worth going through, worth seeing. But it's weird, right? Because the last game, Hellblade from 2017, ended off on a good-ish note. You got this full character arc of Senua, grief, loss, psychosis, all of that. She got through the loss of Dillian. She literally went to hell and back. She started to kind of accept that the Furies, the voices in her head, is a part of her. And now, okay, cool. And of course, confidently ended with her looking at the camera saying, hey, there is another story to tell. But now with the second game, I don't know what the full goal or direction was. Like, I'm not going to spoil it. I'll talk about spoilers later in the video if there's anything really to hash out. But for now, spoiler free. But like, I don't think there either was enough of another story to tell or not enough time and budget to truly tell that story. Because ultimately, I think Hellblade 2 feels a little cut short for me. You get a full story, it just ends a little abruptly. Like, just when it starts to really get good, and once I started to really get interested in it, it wraps up. And the way it was paced, it felt like I did an intro, I walked through some spooky caves, and then the game was over. And that's never a good feeling. And I am someone on record who likes short games. The original Hellblade wasn't too long either. But I think the difference is that the original Hellblade, like, it felt like a trek. It felt like a real journey. I felt like I did something. Where in the second game, I don't really know about that as much. It rehashed some of Senua's issues, but also it focused on a lot of other characters. She is now helping others. The burden is on her to really help these people, but you only get a taste of who those people are. One of those characters, the male character you link up with, the younger guy, I think has somewhat of a good arc and some interesting stuff. That's because of course, the performance, the acting, everything like that, the writing, but I still wish there was more of him. And then the other two supporting characters, they are basically just like a little bit of a setup for something you do in the plot, and then they just come along for the ride. And it just felt a little off to me. And by off, I just mean I wanted more of those characters because they did a good job setting them up, and I just wish there was more. That's the thing I keep harping on here. And I know it sounds like I don't like the game, so before I keep going, I do want to say what I loved about it was that they didn't like try and make it this big, massive open world RPG. It is just another Hellblade game. And I actually just liked settling back into the shoes of Senua, having the headphones on, having that, binaural audio and all the different voices. I just like that from a storytelling and gameplay mechanic. Like, I like just going through an adventure and having voices speak to you and tell you different things, call upon the characters' doubts, their fears, their desires, motivation, confusion, everything. And some of the moments in this game are incredibly memorable. Some beautiful woods, gorgeous environments, and some showdowns with some enemies that were really fucking cool. There is one point in this game, it's like a kind of drawn out battle where you're fighting multiple enemies, obviously one-on-one, but like you're fighting multiple enemies in an area, your allies are there as well, other people are there, and the way it goes down, the way this whole combat section goes down, like it's a lot of transitions, cutscenes, back to characters, but animations, finishing moves, transitions to other characters talking, and then fighting another character. The way it all is choreographed, the way it all goes, I think it may be one of the most impressive examples of performance capture and video game graphics and gameplay and all of that really working together, working in synchronization. As I was playing it, like, you ever play something or even like you watch something and you're like, holy shit, people made this. This is crazy. That was me for this. And like, I know graphics aren't everything. Gameplay and fun factor is the most important thing. But for certain video game nerds, I don't know, seeing how gorgeous this game is a little part of the fun. I'm not trying to, like, you know, justify things or anything, but like, I do get a kick out of seeing how far games can push things, and this thing pushes it. I mean, like, I just think about games like, show this to your grandpa or your uncle that's only ever played Pong, and his brain's probably gonna like fucking explode. I don't know. Then of course, some of the other big moments, like kind of the more horror elements, but also the stuff with the giants. The giant isn't a spoiler. When Xbox first revealed the game, they showed her facing off against a giant. That moment is really cool. They showed that whole thing during an Xbox gameplay presentation thing, and to be honest, I think that was one of the bigger, cooler moments in the game. But regardless, I really liked experiencing it. The game has a lot of moments like that I really liked. I think a lot of it just lacks like the feeling of like a massive adventure or a journey. You know, it will transition to other periods of time. Like things will move forward, like it'll cut away from Senua and then show you somewhere else later on. So it didn't really feel as adventurous, but also it didn't feel as intimate or personal as the original game. And I think with the original game, that's one of the better things it had going for it, because from a gameplay standpoint, for me, that first game left a lot to be desired. I started to get a little sick of the puzzles towards the end. They just overstayed their welcome. The combat is simple, effective, but after a while it got a little rinse and repeat. And thankfully, the story, the pacing, you know, the little bits of boss stuff, the lore stuff, that all helped move the game along. Where in the second game, there are less puzzles. They came up with like another like puzzle idea, but like they still scaled them back. There's less combat, but the combat is kind of better. It's a little bit more visceral, but it's also more simple because you're fighting one enemy at a time. But it's a little bit more challenging, it's a little bit more involved, and it is always gorgeous and stunning, and it does feel cool to pull that shit off. But with that, and I think players are having a bigger conversation about this now, I gotta say, I am someone, like, I'm gonna put my cards out on the table. I like all different types of games. I don't mind a walking simulator. I don't mind a game where I don't do much. One of my favorite games is Metal Gear Solid 4. There are like hour-long cutscenes in that game, and I lap that shit up. There's a video on this channel, there's a video on Game, I don't know, like I've talked about it a lot. I've defended the Order 1886. I love the shit out of that game. But with Hellblade 2, I really found myself with like the gameplay kind of scaling back. Like I'm like, well, what are we doing here? You know, I was hoping after the first game that they would just kind of refine some of those gameplay elements, give me a little bit more to do. But if anything, they lessened them and mostly scaled them back. I like that the combat, you know, the sections where you square off against people, I like that it's quality over quantity. I will say that, especially with how good some of these enemies look compared to the first game. The first time you square off with one of the main characters, like a real human man, you're like, holy shit, that's a guy in front of me. And just like the first game, like some of those enemies feel taller than you, more imposing. They'll like flex and be like, let's go. And here, you know, you have characters like yelling at you, shouting at you, looking at you, trying to trick you as they're fighting you. And I was like, this is incredible, especially in the rain, in the dark, by the fire. Like it's impressive, right? So with there, like I said, it's quality over quantity. But then with everything else, not really a lot else to do. It's a lot more walking. It's a lot more just pressing forward to climb up a cliff or crawl through a hole, but without any, like, you know, emotional significance to it. It's not Spider-Man stuck under the rubble trying to believe in himself. A lot of the sequences are you just getting somewhere and you're pushing forward, and I just didn't find it very engaging, to the point where even like the lore markers you collect, similar to the first game, are way less and unfortunately not as interesting. The lore and like the storyteller, like what he's doing here, doesn't feel like it ties as well into this game as it did in the last game. So that was, and I posted this on social media, this was kind of a damning thing, but by finishing the game, I just ultimately felt mostly unfulfilled. I didn't feel as strongly as I did when completing the last game. And it's a combination of, number one, you know, less gameplay, which I can be forgiving of. But when you combine that with me just not being as into the story this time around, it is a good story. It just doesn't like really sink its hooks in you. At least it didn't with me. Some people might, I'm going to replay it again because it's short, but some people might take away more. Some people had a profound reaction to the first game. And I think that's incredible. I was one of the people that just thought it was really amazing, interesting, and different. The second game, not so much for me, but I could still see some people pulling some things out of it that will really resonate with them. So that part, the story part, is super subjective. But for me, that's where I ultimately felt unfulfilled. Cards on the table, though, like I think I'm also like forgiving of this game, and I've said this on the podcast, that there's nothing really like this in terms of games. Not the, lack of gameplay or like it's a cutscene simulator like what people will say, but the presentation style, the setting, the atmosphere, this level of grime, this level of like horror, obviously also the portrayal of psychosis, all that. There's no other games really like that. And I'm not giving it accolades just because it's doing that, but because I like it. I see that shit. I'm like, this is cool. This is different. At least I haven't seen anything like this. That's why I like the first game. That's why I still ultimately kind of enjoyed playing through this one. But I don't think it's gonna live in my heart forever like the original did. Even with that, and I said this in the Game Ranks video, like it kind of feels to me like a middle chapter. Also a middle chapter that just didn't have enough time or anything in it. But I still would play another one. And I know like that might make some people mad because some people are just really riled up about this game. But like I would play another one. Shit, like let's be, especially because again, the style of game, the presentation, the lead actress being incredible, just someone I want to see in this adventure, also the level of gore and horror and like dread pit of your stomach stuff is good. And they did ramp up the gore for the second game. I really like that. Where in the original game, the gore was used sparingly and shockingly at certain points. Like obviously the first time she sees Dillion is brutally grotesque, but impactful. Here in the second game, you see a lot more of that shit. And that's cool. Gore is cool sometimes. Convoluted way of saying that like I would play another one. Even if like I didn't absolutely love this, I would still play another one. Partially also because I just like what Ninja Theory does from the early days. Heavenly Sword, Devil May Cry, which I defended as a diehard Devil May Cry fan even. Also, obviously, Enslaved, Odyssey to the West. I like what they've done with story, presentation, and, actor portrayal and, cinematic stuff, while always kind of having a good grip on gameplay. With Hellblade 2, that's where it really started. I mean, Hellblade 1, yes, sort of, but with Hellblade 2, it feels like now that's kind of taking a back seat. And moving forward, I just want a meatier adventure, more to sink my teeth into, both from a story standpoint, but also from like a player engagement standpoint. I want to be engaged. And again, I knew what I was getting into with this game because the original Hellblade is simple, but this is simpler. I don't need an active reload mechanic or a jump button in this game or endless collectibles. I just need to feel like I'm a little bit more of a participant. And I want to leave it off with how I started it. Like, if you like the first game, you should absolutely play this. Number one, because you can finish it in like 6 hours. So in terms of like time investment, if you have Game Pass, like, yeah, all right, give it a shot. It's not like a disgrace to the original game or anything like that. Like, I still like seeing Senua in adventures. I just hope that if they do make another one, there's a bit more to it. That's it. Things are simple here. This is what I do. I talk about video games. I talk about stuff I love. So if you sat around for this long, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm just yapping. So yeah, let me know in the comments what you think. I know I didn't get into spoilers. I didn't really feel like I needed to too much other than like the ending, but like we'll talk about that some other time. Let me know what you think about the game. And if you don't like this game and like you're gonna just comment and be like, game sucks, I can't believe they did this. Like we know. So I would say if you have something more productive to add, and I'm not trying to be like condescending or anything like that, but like there is an interesting conversation to be had if you don't like the game. So like, honestly, let me know exactly why. Don't make it weird. But like, seriously, whether you love it, hate it, let's talk about this stuff down in the comments. I definitely want to hear from you. But again, if you just like listening to a guy like just yap about shit he likes, or kind of likes in this case, clicking the like button helps me. Thank you. But that's it. I'm Jake Baldino. Subscribe because video games. Pizza's on me.